Welcome back, friends. It has been some time since we've read a chapter. I'm happy to be back. We're reading chapter 17 today. Native Americans, Custodians of the Land. After the meeting, I shipped my new camping equipment by Greyhound Freight to Carlin and bought myself a ticket on the Southern Pacific. The train from Oakland to Carlin provided everything anyone could want in a train ride. A winding climb across the Sierra Nevadas with tunnels, bridges, snow-filled forests trailing off into the steep mountains high above the tracks, and the tracks themselves plunging into the valleys miles below. The ride lasted 12 hours, and it was dark long before Carlin. I knew this train would pass through our canyon campsite in Palisades, and I hoped to see the campfire from the window. I watched for a long time, but just when I expected to spot the campsite, I was interrupted by a crewman with a lantern. He had a uniform like the conductor's, but the gold letters on his hat spelled brakeman. You the one for Carlin? Yes. Are we about there? Few minutes. We had a guy get off in Carlin just last week. How come you're getting off in Carlin? Well, that's my stop. Need any help with your stuff? No, I just have a couple of small cases. Reason I ask? This ain't no passenger stop, just a service stop. There's no baggage service here. You see how we let you out right here in the bushes? Yes, I know, I said. Well, you don't live here, I know that. People were turning in their seats and looking. If you lived here, I'd know ya. I lived in Carlin 15 years, just moved. Mostly railroad people here. Never seen you on this run before either. I had no reply. How come you're getting off in Carlin? Well, I'm just visiting here. Who? John Pope. He's an SP brakeman, you might know him. I don't want to open this door back here. Step don't go out too good. He walked up the aisle to the front of the car and turned around. I was going to let you out in the front here. You can wait till we stop. Then he walked back and leaned over me. Yeah, I know him, he said. I know him. I stepped out. The air was fresh and cool. The brakeman began efficiently signaling with his lantern. Know where you're going? That's Pope's right over that way. They said they might drive up here, so I thought I'd wait, I said. No, you can't depend on them. You can walk right through those bushes if you ain't scared of getting snake bit. You been there before? Yes, I've been there. I guess I'll walk. You best do that. You be standing here all night. It's a couple minutes walk. I started to walk, and the brakeman called after me. Has he been feeding you on that Big Chief BS? What? Hasn't he been giving you all that Rollin' Thunder crap? He's not a chief, and that's his name, I said. Assumed Maine, you mean? Nobody's name is Rollin' Thunder. He laughed. Well, that's his name, I said softly. I walked a distance and looked back. I could see the brakeman waving his lantern. I wanted to shout, Every name's assumed. Where'd you get yours anyway? Where would a native get a name like John Pope? But I turned and kept on walking. The whole family was home, and Ann Haberton and Richard Clemmer were waiting to drive me up to the canyon. I had arrived about 20 minutes earlier than they had expected. Before leaving for Hamp, I had coffee and a chat with Rolling Thunder. He and Richard had been talking about the pinyon trees in the chaining project. If they could determine when and where the next chaining might start, they wanted to be there. At 20 acres an hour, the tractors and chain can destroy a several hundred-acre site in little time. Rolling Thunder pointed out, so we had to move fast to catch them in the act. I told them that I had seen Jim Woods, the lawyer, just before leaving Berkeley, and he had asked about the Shoshone Treaty, whether it was ratified by Congress, and when and whether it was signed by the president. Woods wanted a copy of that treaty with the signatures, if possible, I said. He's been reading in the law library. He said if anyone wants to become literally sick, they can read what he has read about natives in our law books. I talked to another lawyer, Mel DeLay. He's read the note we put up on the bulletin board at the UC Law School, and he would like to meet us. He had a practice in Utah and then moved out to the Bay Area, and he wouldn't consider taking another state bar exam to practice in Nevada. He doesn't think there's too much hope for finding a good lawyer in Nevada, unless maybe we could find some radical young lawyer, maybe the son of a rich rancher. Rolling Thunder said, I suppose we knew it wouldn't be easy. Our conversation was over, and we went back up to the mountain. As the days went by, I saw little of Rolling Thunder. At first I spent time making improvements on the campsite. Then I made cassette recordings of notes and reports and worked on my papers. I watched Anne do clay pottery using techniques she had learned in Hopi land. Richard was busy with his thesis, a comparative analysis of the effects of non-native jurisdiction over Hopi and Western Shoshone communities. The campsite was pleasant enough, but during the day the sun was scorching overhead and the nights were too cold to be out of bed or away from the fire. The hay fever I had forgotten about in San Francisco had returned, and I began taking hay fever pills and eye drops. I would have found all of these little discomforts acceptable if I could have spent more time with Rolling Thunder. I began to wonder at the wisdom of maintaining the camp in this canyon so far from Carlin. We began considering the possibility of renting a place in town, and I decided to discuss it with Rolling Thunder. But the days continued to pass, and there was no chance to talk to Rolling Thunder. One time, Oscar Johnny was visiting, so we went down to the mountain for an evening. Another day, Alice Floto came over from Salt Lake City. She and Rolling Thunder talked about my hay fever and worked out a recipe that would need 12 herbs. Then more days passed, and I waited at camp. Early one morning, when we knew Rolling Thunder would be home, Richard drove me down the hill to the house. I sat in the living room and talked to Spotted Fawn, waited for Rolling Thunder to come in from his little house across the road. He got up, but he did not come. Spotted Fawn took him coffee on a tray. When she did not come back, I sat alone in the living room. I had made up my mind to talk to Rolling Thunder. As the hours passed, my impatience made waiting difficult. I felt uncomfortable. My eyes were running and I sneezed. I had no medicine, and worse, no handkerchief. There was no sense in staying out in weed country. I should be here where I could see Rolling Thunder every day, and not out in the hills. I could see waiting for hours. I fed my impatience for some time, and then I had another thought. This is foolish. Your hay fever's making you think like this. Eagerness to learn is natural, but complaining is unnecessary. You are here for the day, and you have an abundance of time. It's ridiculous to feel impatient waiting for Rolling Thunder. Besides, I suspected Rolling Thunder would not come as long as I was feeling this way. That was it. I was not impatient because I was waiting. I was waiting because I was impatient. I began to think I might produce a change in my state if I worked on it for a while. I closed my eyes. In a few minutes, Rolling Thunder walked through the door. He was cheerful. I wouldn't be in too much of a hurry about moving in from out there, he said. Instead, you could be thinking about arranging things nice. Really fix up one of those old houses. I know it's going to be getting cold, but if you'd start thinking about that now, you could go quite a while out there yet. You're feeling you'd like to be in closer to the house here, but that's not necessarily where it's happening. He knew exactly what had been on my mind. Now, if you want to see native medicine, you'll just have to watch everything that's going on, and maybe you'll see something. Whatever takes place that might interest you, it's just going to happen as a part of all the work. We can't isolate some particular activity and do it just to be doing it. It all has to be part of the work. And if I'm going to be doctoring, there's no telling when that might be. I might doctor somebody tomorrow and then again I might not. But if I do, or when I do, it's more likely to be out there than here. I don't like to do any doctoring here in the house. For one thing, it's best to be in a natural setting, and for another thing, it's not good for the house. If everyone would start coming up in here to be doctored, it would get pretty heavy. I've had trouble here before when I doctored people with mental and emotional problems, and then those problems kept hanging around here in the house. Some of them are pretty persistent and pretty destructive. There are ways to handle those things too, but I shouldn't have to be thinking about that all the time in my own home. This is where I live and rest. This is where I have my family. So my hope is to have a good place to doctor people, even a place where people can stay. Then, when you go back to the Menninger Foundation, you can tell them that I would be willing to work with some of their patients. I would be willing to take some referrals from the right psychiatrist, if I could do it in my own place, and if I could accept or reject whomever I wanted. Of course, there are things these doctors up at the Menninger Foundation know that I don't know, but there are a lot of things that they don't know, and these are things that I could help them with. Some of these things might sound strange to these doctors, like some of the cases they call schizophrenia, and some other cases where people are influenced by other beings. Sometimes a part of a person's energy is taken by another. Sometimes people get spaced out on drugs and things, and other beings come in and try to take over. And sometimes two spirits try to occupy one body. Doctors' training is very limited, and they have little awareness or curiosity outside their training. Some of them are even trained to be cynical, but they have no need to go by their feelings. They have a chance now to see how these things work. It's high time doctors and medicine men started working together. There was no need to say anything, and there was nothing to say. No trace of my former state of mind remained. In fact, I realized suddenly that there was no trace of my hay fever, at least not at the moment. Was it possible that the hay fever was very related to my state of mind? I was sure that, feeling as I did now, any hay fever discomforts would be utterly impossible. "We haven't forgotten your hay fever capsules," Rolling Thunder said. "The reason I haven't given them to you yet is because I don't have any marshmallow root. I have everything else, and they sometimes have marshmallow root at a health store in Elko. So maybe pretty soon we can make those up for you and put those into capsules. They should clear up that trouble so it won't come back." Rolling Thunder's constant awareness of my thoughts and feelings didn't appear to me as any kind of strange psychic phenomenon. His was a kind of caring. I had the feeling that if I were able to be with him at his level, Rolling Thunder would not have to do all of this talking. Just a few moments ago, I had been preoccupied with my feelings of disappointment and frustration at not being with Rolling Thunder more. But now it was hard to believe that such feelings had ever existed or could ever return. The afternoon went by too fast. Anne and Richard came for me and we left immediately. I should have liked to have stayed a while longer, but we wanted to get the fire started and supper on before sundown. After supper, we sat with empty plates and looked into the fire, and I talked about my afternoon with Rolling Thunder. It's funny, I said, but I feel that he's always around. They agreed. A few moments later, Rolling Thunder drove up into camp in his Camaro. He had come to give us proof that what I had just said was true. The evidence was a fresh apple pie that Spotted Fawn had made up and sent for us on a blue pie plate. That is where we will stop today for chapter 17. We'll be back sooner this time. Nyawa, thank you very much, friends. Take care.